Firefly Nights. An Alphabet Sweethearts Romance. Written by Susanne. Please like and subscribe. Chapter 1. Grace. It is a truth universally acknowledged, I whisper to the empty library, that a single man in possession of a tool belt must be in want of something to fix. Jane Austen would probably haunt me for that adaptation, but it's been hard to focus on anything else since last week's encounter at the visitor center. Nathan Cole. Licensed contractor. Apparently competent and charming, according to him. The garbage can beneath the worst leak offers a steady percussion, drip drip drip. 3 more have joined it overnight, creating an archipelago of plastic islands between the biography and travel sections. At this rate, I'll need to build an ark before the morning rush. This is what you get, I mutter, shelving books with more force than necessary, for letting Ben recommend a contractor because he has nice forearms. My face heats at the admission. Not that I noticed his forearms. Or his smile. Or the way I stop myself, horrified. This is not turning into one of those stories. The library has always been my sanctuary, a place where reality and fiction blend into something manageable. Safe. Here, even the most dramatic tales stay contained within their covers, and happy endings are guaranteed if you just turn enough pages. I retreat to the circulation desk, pulling out my worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. Gran gave it to me on my 16th birthday, saying every woman should have at least one book that feels like coming home. The familiar pages fall open to my favorite part, Elizabeth finally seeing Pemberley, finally understanding there's more to Mr. Darcy than her first impressions suggested. Not helping, I tell the book, closing it firmly. Movement outside the front windows catches my eye. A familiar figure approaches the entrance, coffee cups in hand. My heart does a strange little skip as I glance at my watch. 7:05 a.m., nearly 2 hours before opening. I hurry to the door, already composing a polite but firm speech about library hours. But when I reach the entrance, Nathan Cole's smile through the glass makes the words dissolve before they reach my tongue. He holds up the coffee cups and mouths, early bird special? I shouldn't. The library doesn't officially open until 9, and I have a very specific morning routine that doesn't include contractors bearing caffeine. But another drip echoes from the travel section, and really, this is about protecting the books. Nothing more. My reflection in the glass door catches my eye as I unlock it. The woman staring back looks exactly like what she is, a librarian who spends more time with fictional characters than real people. The kind who categorizes her personal library by genre and author and size scheme. Who talks to books more easily than she talks to people. You're early, I say, opening the door just wide enough to be polite. Figured you might need caffeine before I start talking about support beams and shingles. He offers one of the cups. Unless you're more of a tea person? You seem like you might be a tea person. The library doesn't open for another 2 hours person. But I accept the coffee anyway, stepping back to let him in. Nathan fills the doorway in a way that seems impossible, morning light catching in his tousled hair and yes, fine, those unfairly nice forearms exposed by rolled-up sleeves. He's wearing a smile that belongs in the kind of romance novels I pretend not to keep in my bedside drawer. Should I be worried about angry card catalog spirits this early in the morning? He asks, glancing around. Or maybe the ghost of dissertations past? The air conditioning, I reply, closing the door behind him. It's been temperamental lately. Add it to my list. He steps further into the library, and I catch a hint of sawdust and coffee and something else. Something that makes me think of summer nights and possibility. I'm starting to think this place needs more than a new roof. It needs someone who understands it, I say before I can stop myself. Someone who sees more than just an old building with problems to fix. Nathan turns, and something in his expression shifts. Softens. Show me, he says quietly. Help me see it through your eyes. And maybe it's the earnestness in his voice, or the way early sunshine turns the library into something out of a story, or simply that I'm tired of being the cautious heroine who never takes chances, but I hear myself say, okay. Where would you like to start? He grins, and oh, this is definitely turning into one of those stories. Wherever you think this story begins. The Tuesday morning story time crowd spills out of the children's section in a wave of excited chatter and construction paper. I'm shelving nearby, allegedly organizing the middle grade novels, but actually watching Nathan patch a small crack in the ceiling. He's been working steadily all morning, pausing occasionally to ask questions about the library's history or comment on my creative organization system. Miss Grace. Charlie Carter tugs at my cardigan. Can you help us reach the dinosaur books? We're doing reports. Of course, but I start to set down my stack of returns. I got it. Nathan's already climbing down from his ladder. T-Rex or Triceratops? Or are we more interested in the flying ones? Pterodactyls were always my favorite. Charlie's whole face lights up. You know about dinosaurs? Know about them? I wanted to be one when I grew up. Nathan crouches down to his level, completely at ease. Turns out contractor was the next best thing. Within minutes, he's surrounded by the entire story time group, perched on the carpet as he helps them find books, while keeping up a steady stream of dinosaur facts and terrible prehistoric puns. Hey, who has a dinosaur joke? He asks, passing a book to Charlie. Me. Sophie bounces on her knees. Why did the dinosaur cross the road? To get to the other side, several kids chorus. Better than mine, Nathan laughs. Want to hear why you can't hear a pterodactyl going to the bathroom? He pauses dramatically. Because the P is silent. The kids dissolve into giggles, and even I have to bite back a smile. The children are captivated. Even Mrs. Reynolds, our most particular patron, smiles as she passes with her weekly romance novel selection. I turn back to my shelving, trying to ignore the warm feeling in my chest. So he's good with kids. And knows about dinosaurs. And looks unfairly attractive while sitting cross-legged on a rainbow reading carpet. It doesn't change anything. Hey, book whisperer. His voice startles me out of my thoughts. The kids have dispersed with their dinosaur books, and Nathan's leaning against the nearby shelf. You've been organizing the same set of books for 20 minutes. Must be a fascinating system. Heat creeps up my neck. I was thinking. About your books. His tone is gently teasing. Or let me guess, mentally redesigning the Dewey Decimal System? Not everyone considers that boring, I say stiffly, sliding the mysterious Benedict Society into place with more force than necessary. Never said boring. He steps closer, reaching past me to straighten a book I missed. His arm brushes mine, and I nearly drop the entire stack I'm holding. Just wondering what stories you get lost in up there. I don't get lost. But even I can hear the defensive note in my voice. I simply appreciate the value of a well-ordered library and you're doing it again. He taps the spine of the book in my hands. Living so much in these worlds that you're missing the one right in front of you. That's not, I stop, flustered by his proximity and the hint of concern beneath his teasing. Don't you have a ceiling to fix? Worried I'll figure you out? His smile is softer now, almost wistful. Too late, Grace. You're not nearly as mysterious as you think you are. You don't know anything about me. I know you whisper to your books when you think no one's watching. He starts ticking off points on his fingers. I know you organize the children's section by reading level and theme because you want kids to find exactly the right story when they need it. I know you keep a secret stash of chocolate in the bottom drawer of your desk for emergency reshelving fuel. And I know you're terrified of letting anyone past those carefully organized walls you built. I stare at him, heart pounding. How did you? I pay attention. He shrugs, but his eyes never leave mine. Maybe if you looked up from your books more often, you'd notice people. Before I can respond, a crash echoes from the front desk, followed by a small voice saying, "Oops." Nathan grins. Duty calls, book whisperer. Try not to get lost in any fictional worlds while I'm gone. He heads toward the commotion, calling out, "Everyone okay over there?" You know, this reminds me of the time a stegosaurus tried to check out a library book.
Chapter 2. Nathan. The library's third step from the top creaks when you put weight on the left side. The window in the reference section sticks unless you lift and slide at the exact same time. The radiator in the corner makes a sound like a sleeping cat when it kicks on. And Grace Lawson talks to her books when she thinks no one's listening. I know, she whispers to a worn copy of something thick and literary looking. You belong in classical literature, not contemporary fiction. Let's get you home. I hide my smile behind the clipboard I'm pretending to study. I should be focused on the roof assessment, plotting beam replacements, calculating material costs, wondering why nobody noticed the water damage before it got this bad. Instead, I'm watching the town librarian have a conversation with a book like it's the most natural thing in the world. Maybe for her, it is. Need a minute alone with your friend there? I call down from my perch on the stepladder. I can come back when you're done with story time. She startles, nearly dropping the book. A flush spreads across her cheeks, bringing out the light spray of freckles I definitely haven't been noticing all morning. I was just. She pushes a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. It's important to maintain proper categorization. Right. Wouldn't want to offend the other books. I tap my pencil against the clipboard. Though I gotta say, your filing system's almost as complicated as this roof structure. And that's saying something. Grace straightens, chin lifting. There's a logic to it. Oh, I believe you. I climb down the ladder, unable to resist the urge to get a closer look at that indignant expression. Same way there's logic to how I know this building was constructed in sections. See these joints here? I point to where the original architecture meets a later addition. Someone wanted more space but tried to maintain the original style. Didn't quite get it right, though. That's where most of your leaks are coming from. How can you tell all that just by looking? Same way you can probably tell the difference between, I squint at the book in her hands, Virgil and whatever passes for epic poetry these days. You learn to read the signs. She studies me for a moment, head tilted. Is that what you do? Read buildings? Buildings, broken things, people who think they're hiding behind books. The words slip out before I can catch them. I don't hide behind books. No? I step closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her green eyes. So what were you doing this morning when you spent 15 minutes staring at the same page of, what was it? Pride and Prejudice? Her eyes widen. You saw that? Hard to miss. You were smiling at it like it was telling you secrets. Maybe it was. But there's a defensive note in her voice that makes me want to push just a little further. See, that's what I don't get. I lean against a nearby shelf, careful not to disturb its precise order. You spend so much time in these fictional worlds when the real one's right here. Look, I gesture to the window, where late morning sun streams through the stained glass, painting patterns across the floor. That's not something you'll find in any book. Grace follows my gaze, and for a moment, something shifts in her expression. Like she's seeing it, really seeing it, for the first time. Then she blinks, and the walls come back up. The real world isn't always as reliable as books, she says quietly. Stories stay where you put them. They don't. She trails off, hugging Virgil closer to her chest. Don't what? Surprise you? Disappoint you? Change? I resist the urge to reach out, to brush back that stubborn strand of hair that's escaped again. Seems to me that's exactly what makes them worth exploring. A crash from the children's section saves her from having to answer. We both turn toward the sound of giggling and a small voice saying, "It wasn't me." That'll be the Tuesday crafts crowd, Grace sighs. I should. Go. Be librarian Y, make sure no glue sticks were harmed in whatever just happened. I gesture to my ladder. I'll be here, reading your building story. Trying to figure out how to give it a happy ending. She pauses halfway across the room, looking back at me with an expression I can't quite read. And what if it doesn't want to be fixed? Everything wants to be fixed, Grace. I tap the wall beside me, feeling the solid bones beneath the surface. Some things just need a little more patience than others. She shakes her head, but I catch the hint of a smile as she disappears around the corner. I turn back to my assessment, adding another note about the window frames that need restoration. And if I'm smiling too, well, that's just professional satisfaction and a job that needs doing. Dusk settles over Juniper Falls in layers of violet and indigo, the kind of evening that makes you understand why people put down roots in small towns. I should be heading back to my rental, reviewing material costs, or at least grabbing dinner. Instead, I find myself walking toward the meadow behind the library, drawn by the quiet and the way the tall grass ripples in the evening breeze. Something about this place gets under your skin. Maybe it's the mountain air, or the way everyone knows your coffee order by day 3, or a familiar figure stands at the edge of the meadow, silhouetted against the deepening purple sky. Grace. She's traded her work cardigan for a soft-looking sweater, her hair falling loose around her shoulders instead of pinned back in its usual neat arrangement. She hasn't noticed me yet, too absorbed in whatever she's watching in the gathering shadows. I'm about to call out when the first firefly blinks to life near her shoulder. Her quiet gasp carries across the evening air. More lights flicker on, scattered through the meadow like stars falling to earth. Grace turns slowly, following their dance, and the expression on her face. It's like watching someone step into their favorite story. Beautiful, aren't they? She startles at my voice but doesn't retreat. Progress, maybe. I'd never seen so many at once. Peak season. I move closer, careful not to break whatever spell the evening's woven around her. They like it here because of the long grass and the stream running behind those trees. Good breeding ground. Trust you to know the practical explanation. But there's no bite in her words, just gentle amusement. Can't you just enjoy the magic of it? Says the woman who cross-references her folklore collection by country and creature type. That's different. She watches a firefly drift past, its light reflecting in her eyes. Books need order. Some things. She gestures to the meadow, where more tiny lights bloom with each passing minute. Some things should just be wonderful. I study her profile in the fading light, the way wonder softens all her careful edges. Yes, I say quietly. Some things should. She glances at me, catching something in my tone. A flush spreads across her cheeks. I didn't expect to see you here. Had to check the drainage around the foundation. A half-truth. Library that old, you have to look at the whole picture. And what's the picture telling you? That sometimes the most important parts of a building aren't in the blueprints. The words come out more honest than I intended. Sometimes you have to wait for the right light to see what needs fixing. A firefly lands on her sleeve, and Grace goes perfectly still, like she's afraid of startling it. Not everything needs to be fixed, she whispers. No. I reach over slowly, carefully, and the firefly walks onto my finger. But some things are worth trying for. We stand there, watching the small light pulse between us. Grace's shoulder brushes mine as she leans closer to see, and I catch the scent of old books and lavender. It's not a combination I ever thought would knock me sideways. I used to pretend they were fairies, she admits, the words barely a breath. When I was little, Gran would bring me out here with a jar, but I could never bear to catch them. It felt wrong to trap something so. She trails off, embarrassed. Magical? I offer, letting the firefly take flight. It rises to join its companions, painting light trails through the twilight. You're making fun of me. I'm really not. I turn to face her fully. You see magic in everything, Grace. Books, fireflies, this old library that everyone else wrote off as a lost cause. It's beautiful, baffling, completely disarming. It's different. She looks up at me, really looks, and for a moment I think she might say something more. But another firefly drifts between us, breaking whatever was building in that pause. I should go, she says, wrapping her arms around herself. It's getting dark. Want company back to your car? I walked. I'm just over on Maple Street. Then let me walk you home. When she hesitates, I add, consider it part of my civic duty. Protecting the town's librarian from rogue fireflies and leaky roofs. That earns me a smile, small but real. You're ridiculous. You like it. She shakes her head, but falls into step beside me as we leave the meadow behind.
Chapter 3. Grace. Everything okay over there? I call out, unable to completely hide my concern for the books I'd carefully relocated to a supposedly safe distance. Another crash from the reference section is followed by what sounds suspiciously like cursing. So much for my peaceful morning. The distinctive whir of power tools has been shattering the library's quiet for the past hour, and I'm starting to question the wisdom of letting Nathan start the new shelving installation at 9 in the morning. Just peachy. Nathan's head appears around the corner, a fine dust coating his dark hair. Though I've got to ask, why do you have 3 different editions of the complete works of Shakespeare within arm's reach of each other? They're different modern English translations, I explain, moving closer to check on my precious volumes. The Norton has better annotations, but the Riverside's translations are more poetic, and the third one has the original folios for comparison. He sets down his drill, eyebrows lifting. You actually read all of them? Of course. How else would I know which version to recommend when someone needs? I stop at his growing grin. What? Nothing. Just trying to picture you curled up with 3 massive books, cross-referencing Shakespeare's word choices. As opposed to what? Facebook and Instagram? Hey, social media has its place. He picks up a piece of wood, measuring carefully. But I was thinking more along the lines of, living. Experiencing things firsthand instead of through other people's words. The familiar defensiveness rises in my chest. Books aren't just words. No? He looks up, something challenging in his smile. What are they then? There. I trail my fingers along the spine of the nearest Shakespeare volume. They're possibilities. Every story is a door opening to something new. Something that might seem impossible in regular life, but in books. I pause, searching for words he might understand. In books, the quiet librarian can be the hero. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. People find courage they never knew they had. Nathan sets down his measuring tape, studying me with an intensity that makes my skin tingle. And you don't think those things happen in real life? Of course they do. But in books, you're guaranteed a proper ending. Courage is always rewarded. The risk is always worth taking. I swallow hard, aware I'm revealing more than I mean to. Real life isn't that reliable. Maybe that's what makes it better. He steps closer, and suddenly the reference section feels very small. The uncertainty. The not knowing. The chance that something amazing might be waiting just around the corner. Or something terrible. But isn't that what makes the amazing parts matter more? His voice softens. Your books can only give you someone else's version of life, Grace. Don't you want to write your own story? The words stick in my throat as he reaches past me to grab another piece of shelving. His arm brushes mine, and the scent of sawdust and coffee fills my senses. Besides, he continues, oblivious to my internal chaos, I've seen you with those kids during story time. The way your whole face lights up when they really connect with a book. That's not something you can get from reading about it. That's different. Is it? He starts measuring again, but his eyes keep finding mine. Or is it just easier to pretend real connections aren't worth the risk? You don't know anything about, I start, but he cuts me off with a gentle laugh. I know you've dog-eared page 94 in that copy of Pride and Prejudice you keep at the desk. I know you mouth the words along with your favorite passages when you think no one's watching. And I know you're terrified that if you step out of these stories you love so much, you might find out life can be better than fiction. Heat floods my face. I do not mouth the words. You absolutely do. It's adorable. The drill whirs to life again before I can respond, but his words echo in my head. Better than fiction. As if anything could be better than the carefully crafted worlds waiting in my books. As if real life, with all its messiness and uncertainty, could compete with the promise of happily ever after. But as I watch Nathan work, his movements sure and steady as he builds something new in my carefully ordered world, a treacherous little voice in the back of my mind whispers, "What if he's right?" The thing about stars, a familiar voice says as I round the bend in the path, is that they're both practical and magical at the same time. I freeze, spotting Nathan stretched out on a blanket in the middle of the meadow. He's lying on his back, hands clasped behind his head, staring up at the night sky like it holds answers to questions I didn't know he was asking. "How long have you been out here?" I ask, instead of turning and fleeing like my racing heart suggests. "Long enough to watch Venus rise." He pats the empty space beside him on the blanket. "Care to join the astronomy lesson?" I hesitate. This feels different from our Firefly encounter, more intimate somehow. But curiosity wins out, and I find myself settling carefully onto the corner of the blanket, tucking my legs underneath me. "So," I say, trying to sound casual. "Practical and magical?" He points upward. "Sailors used them to navigate. Farmers planned their crops by them. But people also wished on them, told stories about them, imagined whole worlds in them." He turns his head to look at me. "Remind you of anyone?" "I have no idea what you mean." "Sure you don't, book whisperer." But his voice is warm, almost fond. "See that bright one there? That's Vega. Part of the constellation Lyra, the harp. But the Chinese called it the weaving girl star." I lie back, surprising myself. The sky spreads out above us like pages of an endless story. "I know that one. The weaving girl falls in love with the cowherd star, but they're separated by the Milky Way. They can only meet once a year, when magpies form a bridge between them. Look who knows her star lore." "It's literature," I protest. "Folk tales and mythology are important cultural." "Grace." His quiet laugh interrupts my defensive spiral. "I'm agreeing with you. Stories matter. Even the ones written in stars." Something in his tone makes me turn my head to study his profile. The starlight softens his usual grin into something more contemplative. "Why are you really out here?" I ask. He's quiet for a long moment. "My dad and I used to do this. Every time we moved to a new place we'd find a spot to watch the stars. He'd say no matter where we went, the sky was always familiar." His voice turns wistful. "Guess some habits stick with you. That's actually kind of beautiful. Don't sound so surprised." He shifts slightly, and his arm brushes mine. Neither of us moves away. I contain multitudes. "Did you just quote Walt Whitman?" "See? I pay attention in your library." His shoulder nudges mine gently. "Though I prefer Frost. The best way out is always through." I prop myself up on one elbow to stare at him. "Who are you and what have you done with the man who spent 20 minutes this morning making hammer puns? Can't a guy enjoy wordplay and poetry?" His eyes meet mine, starlight catching in them. "Not everything has to fit in neat categories, Grace." The night air suddenly feels too warm, too close. I lie back down, hyper-aware of every point where our bodies almost touch. "That cluster there," Nathan says softly, pointing again. "Pleiades. The Seven Sisters. Greeks said they were daughters of Atlas, turned into stars to escape a hunter. But to the Japanese, they're Subaru, gathering together. Same stars, different stories. Different perspectives," I murmur. "Exactly." He turns toward me, and I can feel his gaze like a physical thing. Sometimes you have to look at something from a new angle to see what's really there. I swallow hard, knowing we're not talking about stars anymore. "And what if you're afraid of what you might see? Then you find someone to watch the stars with." His hand finds mine in the darkness, just his pinky finger hooking around mine. Someone who understands both the practical and the magical.
Chapter 4. Nathan. That box isn't going to sprout legs and walk itself upstairs. Grace jumps at my voice, nearly dropping the clearly too heavy box of books she's attempting to lift. She's been staring at it for the past 5 minutes, probably trying to calculate the exact angle of attack. "I've got it," she says, but her arms are already trembling from the test lift. "Sure you do." I cross the room and ease the box from her grip. "Where are we headed?" "We aren't headed anywhere. I can manage." Humor me. Consider it my good deed for the day. I adjust my hold on the box. These books weigh a ton. Unless you'd rather explain to the board how the contractor let their librarian pull a muscle during heavy lifting? She sighs, but there's a hint of a smile playing at her lips. Second floor. Historical fiction needs reorganizing. Historical fiction, huh? I follow her up the stairs, noting how she automatically skips the creaky fourth step. Branching out from your daily dose of Elizabeth and Darcy? "There's more to my reading life than Pride and Prejudice," she says primly, but I catch the hint of a smile. Could have fooled me. Page 94's looking pretty worn these days. She flushes slightly. "You're very observant for someone who claims fiction is a waste of time." I never said it was a waste of time. I said real life is better. We reach the landing, and I set the box down to catch my breath. "So enlighten me. What does Grace Lawson read when she's not alphabetizing research materials?" She leans against the railing, considering me. "You really want to know?" Would I ask if I didn't? People ask lots of things they don't really want answers to. True. I stretch my shoulders, preparing for the rest of our journey. But I'm not people. I'm the guy currently preventing you from a nasty back injury. I think that earns me one honest answer about your reading habits. Something shifts in her expression. It's like a wall coming down. "I love stories about ordinary people finding their courage," she says quietly. "About quiet moments that change everything. Magic hiding in plain sight." She trails her fingers along the railing. "One of my favorite books is actually The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. Most people only know her for Anne of Green Gables, but this one's different. It's about a woman who stops being afraid of life." Sounds relevant to your interests. Her head snaps up, eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Hey, no judgment here." I raise my hands in surrender. Just noticing patterns. It's what I do, remember? Like how this building's foundation tells me someone poured their heart into getting every detail right. I pick up the box again. "Same way your books tell me what matters to you." "And what's that?" "The possibility of something more." We start down the row of shelves. "Though I still think reality can surprise you just as much as fiction, if you let it," says the man who measures everything twice. Trust but verify. I grin at her over the box. "Speaking of which, where exactly are these going?" "Just past the Civil War section, next to," she stops abruptly, and I nearly run into her. "Did you reorganize the biography display?" "Guilty. Had some time while the paint was drying yesterday." I set down the box, rolling my shoulders. Thought it might be nice to group them by profession instead of just chronologically. Artists with artists, writers with writers. Figured it might help people find inspiration from similar minds. Grace stares at the display, then at me. "That's actually brilliant." Don't sound so shocked. Some of us can appreciate a good organizational system even without a library science degree. But you said categorizing everything was, and I quote, "taking all the fun out of discovery." Maybe someone's helping me appreciate the value of a well-ordered world. I start unpacking the box, deliberately not meeting her eyes. Even if I still think real life is the best story going. She joins me in unpacking, our hands brushing occasionally over dusty volumes. Real life doesn't always have satisfying endings. Neither does Romeo and Juliet. A startled laugh escapes her. "Did you just make a literary reference to prove reality is better than fiction? Did it work?" No. But she's smiling now, really smiling, the kind that reaches her eyes and makes something in my chest tighten. But I'll give you points for effort. I'll take it. I pull out the last book, something thick and historical looking. So, what makes this one special? She takes it from me, running her fingers over the cover like she's greeting an old friend. It's about a woman who builds a library in the Australian outback. About bringing stories to people who need them. Her voice softens. About how books can be a light in the darkness. Like your library here? This is different. In the book, everything works out perfectly. The roof doesn't leak, the budget stretches exactly far enough, and she stops, blushing. Sorry. I'm doing it again, aren't I? Getting lost in stories. Hey. I touch her wrist lightly, waiting until she meets my eyes. Getting lost isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the only way to find something unexpected. Is that your professional contractor opinion? Nah, that's just me appreciating a good story when I see one. I gesture to the library around us. And this place? Your dedication to it? That's a pretty good story. She ducks her head, but not before I catch her smile. We should finish shelving these. Whatever you say, book whisperer. I reach for another volume. But while we work, tell me more about this Australian library builder. I want to know if she had to deal with stubborn contractors too. You're in my spot. Grace doesn't startle this time when she hears my voice. Just shifts over slightly on the blanket she's spread in our stargazing meadow. Wasn't aware you had a deed to this particular patch of grass, she says, but there's warmth in her voice as she makes room for me. I settle beside her, close enough to catch the familiar scent of old books and lavender. Squatters' rights. Been watching the stars from here every clear night for weeks. Following their stories? Something like that. I lean back on my elbows, studying the familiar patterns above us. Though I usually track them by coordinates rather than myths. Of course you do. She turns her head to look at me. Ever wish you didn't know exactly where everything was? That you could just get lost in the wonder of it? Got lost enough as a kid. The words slip out before I can catch them. Moving every few months, never knowing where we end up next. Navigation became a survival skill. Grace is quiet for a moment. Is that why you like fixing things? Because it's concrete? Maybe. I watch a satellite track across the sky. Dad was good with his hands. The man could fix almost anything. But he got restless easy. One job would end, or he'd hear about better opportunities somewhere else, and we'd pack up again. The only constant was that something always needed fixing wherever we landed. That must have been hard. It was what it was. I shrug, but something in her voice makes me continue. But yeah, I guess that's why I prefer things I can touch. Build. Improve. The satisfaction of solving a real problem, you know? Like a leaky roof? Like a leaky roof. I turn to face her. What about you? What made books your safe place? She's quiet for so long I think she might not answer. When she does, her voice is barely above a whisper. My mom left when I was 7. Walked out one day. No explanation, no goodbye. Gran took me in, but she takes a shaky breath. I had trouble trusting that anything would stay. That anyone would stay. But books always ended the same way. The stories never changed, never left. I could count on them. Without thinking, I reach for her hand in the darkness. She lets me take it. The library was my favorite place. During the summer, Gran would drop me off on her way to work, pick me up hours later. The librarian let me help shelve books and taught me the catalog system. It made sense in a way nothing else did. And now you're making sure other kids have that same safe place. She turns her head sharply. I thought you said I was hiding in fiction. Maybe I'm learning to see different kinds of strength. I squeeze her hand gently. Different ways of facing the world. Above us, a shooting star streaks across the sky. Grace catches her breath. Quick, I say, make a wish. I thought you were too practical for wishes. Maybe you're teaching me to appreciate a little magic. I roll onto my side to face her fully. Besides, shooting stars are just space debris burning up in the atmosphere. Totally scientific. Her laugh is soft but real. You really can't help yourself, can you? Nope. But I can do both, appreciate the science and still make a wish. I watch her profile in the starlight. Same way I'm learning that maybe someone can love stories and still be brave enough to live on her own. Grace is quiet for a long moment. Then, I never said I made a wish. Didn't have to. You've got that look you get when you're about to start a new book, like you're on the edge of something possible. Very poetic for a man who measures in millimeters. What can I say? You're rubbing off on me. I lie back, her hand still in mine. Though if you tell anyone I'm getting sentimental, I'll deny it. Got a reputation to maintain. Your secret's safe with me. She shifts closer, just slightly. Though I might need some renovation work in the poetry section next week. Anything for my favorite librarian. I pause. Even if she does dog-ear her pages.
Chapter 5. Grace. He built you a what? Mrs. Peterson's voice carries across the library's main floor, now transformed for our annual evening with the arts fundraiser. A reading corner for story time, I explain, adjusting a centerpiece. With built-in seating and this clever little stage that. And stars carved into the backdrop that catch the morning light, Nathan finishes, appearing at my elbow with a tray of empty wine glasses. Though Grace is the real genius behind it. She designed the whole layout. I didn't, actually. I'd merely mentioned how the children had to crane their necks to see the pictures during story time. 2 days later, Nathan had shown up with detailed sketches and a glimmer in his eyes. Always so modest, he continues, shooting me a knowing look. You should see her plans for the new reading room. Pure brilliance. Mrs. Peterson practically glows. Nathan, dear, you simply must join our board. We need someone with your vision. And your skill with a hammer doesn't hurt. I hide my smile behind my event checklist. Nathan's only been here an hour, and he's already charmed half the library's biggest donors, fixed the temperamental sound system, and somehow convinced the notoriously frugal Mr. Richardson to double his annual contribution. Just doing my part to support the cause. Nathan's voice carries that easy warmth that makes everyone feel like an old friend. Though I can't take credit for tonight. This is all Grace's show. He gestures to the space around us, and I follow his gaze. The library has been transformed into something from a dream, soft lighting casting gentle shadows through the stacks, elegant displays highlighting our most treasured volumes, intimate seating areas tucked between the shelves where patrons gather in evening wear, discussing books and sipping wine. Hardly, I murmur. I just organized the details. Details like turning the local history section into a perfect backdrop for the string quartet. Or timing the lighting to shift with the sunset? He leans closer, voice dropping. Face it, book whisperer, you've got magic in your organizational skills. Heat creeps up my neck. Before I can respond, a minor commotion breaks out near the auction tables. Speaking of organization, Nathan says, already moving toward the noise, I think someone's about to accidentally reorganize that display. Back in a flash. I watch him wade into the cluster of our most strong-minded patrons, somehow managing to redirect their enthusiasm while making them all laugh. He catches my eye across the room and winks. That young man, Hazel says, materializing beside me with her usual perfect timing, has a gift for making the practical feel magical. Rather like someone else I know, though she usually finds her magic in books. I don't know what you mean, I lie, straightening an already straight place card. Don't you? She watches as Nathan guides Mrs. Richardson away from gesturing too close to a treasured early edition. He builds bridges between worlds. Rather like your favorite stories. He builds actual bridges. And shelves. And apparently custom storytime stages. And yet here he is, discussing 19th century literature with the dean of the community college while simultaneously fixing that wobbly auction podium. Hazel's eyes twinkle. Sometimes the best characters are the ones who surprise us. I want to protest that Nathan isn't a character. He's frustratingly, wonderfully real. But then he catches my eye again, and my carefully prepared response dissolves. Because he is real. Real in a way that makes my fictional heroes pale in comparison. Real in a way that terrifies and thrills me in equal measure. The next item up for bid, Nathan announces from the newly stabilized podium, is a first edition of Little Women. I'm told it's in excellent condition, though personally, I'm more impressed by how the librarian's eyes light up every time she talks about the March Sisters. The crowd chuckles, and the bidding starts high. I clutch my clipboard tighter, fighting a smile as Nathan guides the auction with the same easy confidence he brings to everything else. Careful, dear, Hazel murmurs. That's the look of someone whose story is taking an unexpected turn. The final tally, Nathan announces as we lock up the library, is exactly none of your business until tomorrow. I pause with my key in the lock. What do you mean? I need to update the donor records, Anne. And it can wait until morning. He gently tugs my hand away from the door. Tonight was a success. The library's still standing. Let yourself enjoy it for 5 minutes before diving into spreadsheets. I enjoy spreadsheets. Of course you do. His laugh is soft in the quiet street. Come on, book whisperer. Let me walk you home. I should say no. Should insist on checking the numbers, filing the donor cards, making sure everything's properly documented. Instead, I find myself nodding. The night air wraps around us like a well-worn shawl as we walk, our footsteps falling into an easy rhythm. Nathan's rolled up his sleeves despite the cooling temperature, and I try not to notice how the moonlight plays across his forearms. Penny for your thoughts? He asks. I'm wondering how you convinced Mr. Richardson to bid on that poetry collection. He hates poetry. But he loves a good investment. All I had to do was mention how his grandkids are studying Frost in school. You're dangerous, you know that? He glances at me, eyebrows raised. How so? You see what people need before they know they need it. Like that reading corner. Which you practically designed yourself. I mentioned one thing about the kids straining to see. You're the one who showed up with plans for a whole magical reading space. Magical? His shoulder brushes mine as we walk. I thought I was just the practical one in this partnership. The word partnership sends a warm flutter through my chest. You're not as practical as you pretend to be. And you're not as lost in fiction as you want everyone to believe. We pause at the corner where Sycamore Street meets Oak, the soft glow of street lamps turning everything gentle and dreamlike. A piece of hair has escaped my careful styling, and before I can reach for it, Nathan's hand is there, tucking it behind my ear. His fingers graze my cheek, just barely, but it's enough to make my breath catch. Every romance novel I've ever read has described moments like this. The charged air, the racing heart, the way time seems to slow down. None of them got it quite right. Grace. His voice is rough around the edges. Then a car turns onto the street, headlights sweeping across us, breaking whatever spell had been building. Nathan steps back, clearing his throat. We should get you home before you turn into a pumpkin. Wrong fairy tale, I manage, trying to steady my racing pulse. My mistake. His smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. Though I've got to say, if anyone could make a library out of a pumpkin, it'd be you. We walk the rest of the way in a silence that feels full of unfinished sentences. At my gate, I turn to thank him, but the words stick in my throat. He's looking at me the way he looks at building plans. Like he's trying to solve a puzzle, figure out the best way forward. Good night, book whisperer. His hand finds mine, squeezes once, gentle but sure. Try not to stay up all night worrying about the donation totals. I wasn't going to. Grace. He's definitely laughing at me now, but it's warm, fond. I can literally see your laptop through your living room window. Maybe I just like the ambience. Right. Very atmospheric, those spreadsheets. He backs away, hands in his pockets. Sweet dreams. Try to keep them at least partially grounded in reality. I watch him disappear around the corner, my hand still tingling from his touch. Inside, my laptop waits with its neat columns and orderly numbers. But for once, I don't feel the usual rush to document, organize, control. Instead, I find myself standing in my small garden, looking up at the stars and thinking about the way practical people sometimes surprise you with magic.
Chapter 6. Nathan. It's a 6-month contract minimum. Mike's voice crackles through my phone as I measure window frames in the library's reading room. Full renovation of a historic theater in Burlington. The kind of project that puts you on the map. I press my thumb against a crack in the wood grain, testing its depth. Sounds like a good opportunity. Good? It's perfect for you, Cole. And the timing works. You're almost done with that library job, right? My eyes drift to where Grace sits at the circulation desk, sunlight catching in her hair as she helps a patron. She looks up, catches me watching, and gives me that small secret smile that's been haunting my dreams lately. Almost, I lie, turning away. Send me the details. I end the call and lean against the window frame, letting the cool glass steady me. This is exactly what I've been working toward: bigger projects, better contracts, a chance to really prove myself. So why does the thought of leaving Juniper Falls feel like a wrench in my gut? You know why. Grace's laugh drifts across the library. The real one, not her polite librarian chuckle. I risk a glance and find her talking with Hazel, gesturing animatedly about something. Probably discussing some novel that changes lives or poetry that saves souls. Her whole face lights up when she talks about books, like she's sharing secrets of the universe. Focus, Cole, I mutter, forcing my attention back to the window frame. But the measurements blur together, and all I can think about is how she looked last night under the stars, hair falling loose around her shoulders, eyes bright with something that felt dangerously like possibility. This is exactly why I need to leave. Grace Lawson deserves someone who understands her world of stories and symbolism. Someone who can quote Shakespeare without Googling it first. Someone who stays. Not a guy who learned to pack up his life in under an hour, who measures worth in square footage and load-bearing walls. Earth to Nathan. Grace's voice startles me. She's standing closer than I expected, head tilted in that way that means she's trying to solve a puzzle. You've been staring at that window frame for 10 minutes. Just thinking. Dangerous pastime. Yeah. I straighten, tucking my measuring tape away. Listen, about the rest of the renovation plans. Oh! I had some ideas about the children's section. I was thinking if we extended the reading corner theme. She pulls out a notebook covered in neat annotations, and something in my chest twists. I can't do this. Can't keep pretending I might be the kind of person who could give her the ending she deserves. Grace. The word comes out rougher than I mean it to. She looks up, her smile fading at whatever she sees in my face. What's wrong? I got offered a job. In Burlington. Oh. She clutches her notebook tighter. When would you leave? Soon. The library's renovation is almost done, and I stop, because her expression is doing something complicated, something that makes me want to build walls around her heart. It's a good opportunity. Of course it is. Her voice is library quiet again, all professional polish. Will you have time to finish the reading corner before you go? Grace. Because the summer reading program starts soon, and the kids are really looking forward to. I'll make sure everything's finished, I cut in, unable to bear the careful distance in her tone. You won't even know I was here. The lie tastes like sawdust in my mouth. Because the truth is, I've left my fingerprints all over this library. In the reading corner's carved stars, the reinforced shelving, the window seats designed to catch morning light at the perfect angle for reading. In the way Grace's smile feels like coming home. Right. She takes a step back, and I force myself not to follow. Well, congratulations. Burlington sounds great. Perfect for you. She turns and walks away, spine straight, steps measured. Every inch the collected librarian. But I know her tells now, the way her fingers worry the corner of her notebook, how her shoulders curved slightly inward like she's protecting something fragile. I watch her disappear into the stacks, and for the first time in my life, I understand why people write stories about hearts breaking. Grabbing my tools, I head for the door. I've got measurements to review, contracts to read, a life to pack up. Again. It's what I do. It's who I am. I'm halfway through installing the last set of brackets for the reading corner when Grace's voice cuts through the quiet. Were you even going to say goodbye? My hand slips on the drill, nearly missing the mark. She stands in the doorway, arms crossed, morning light catching the gold in her hair. But there's nothing soft about her expression. Course I was. I turn back to the bracket, needing something solid to focus on. I don't just disappear. No. Her laugh holds no humor. Because it seems like you've been practicing your vanishing act all week. She's not wrong. I've been timing my work around her schedule, showing up early, leaving late, anything to avoid those quiet moments that somehow became the best part of my days. I've been busy. The Burlington contract. Right. The amazing opportunity you can't pass up. She moves closer, and I can feel her eyes on me. Funny how those opportunities always seem to lead somewhere else. The drill whirs to a stop. What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what it means. Her voice wavers slightly. The second something starts to matter, you find a reason to leave. That's not, I set the drill down harder than necessary. This is my job, Grace. Moving on to bigger projects is how it works. Is that what I am? A project? Don't. I face her fully now. Don't make this about. About what? About the fact that you've spent months showing me how to trust reality over fiction, but the minute things get real, you run? Her words hit like a physical blow. I'm not running. No? She gestures to the half-finished reading corner. Then why haven't you looked me in the eyes since you got that call? Because looking at her hurts. Because every time I do, I see all the ways I could disappoint her, all the reasons she deserves better than someone who's never learned how to stay. Some of us don't get to live in stories, Grace. The words come out sharper than I intend. Some of us have to deal with the real world. You think that's what I'm doing? Hiding in stories? Her eyes flash. At least I'm brave enough to believe in something bigger than myself. You're so afraid of letting anyone pass those carefully built walls that you don't even try. And you're so caught up in fictional happy endings that you can't see why this would never work. The silence that follows feels like a physical thing. Grace takes a step back, and I know I've gone too far. Grace. You're right. Her voice is library quiet again. This would never work. Because you're so convinced everything ends badly that you won't even give it a chance to begin. She turns to leave, but pauses in the doorway. You know what the difference is between us, Nathan? I know my books are fiction. But at least they teach me to believe in possibilities. You're so focused on what could go wrong that you can't even see what's right in front of you. The door clicks shut behind her with devastating softness. I stare at the reading corner, at the half-carved stars that were supposed to catch the morning light just right. At all the pieces of myself I've built into this place without meaning to. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am running. But isn't it better to leave now, before I prove that happy endings only exist in her precious books? I pick up my drill again, but the steady rhythm that usually centers me feels hollow. Above me, the unfinished stars mock my attempts at permanence, reminding me that some people are meant to build beautiful things for others to enjoy. And some people are meant to move on.
Chapter 7. Grace. You're alphabetizing my tea collection. Hazel's voice carries a hint of amusement as she watches me rearrange her kitchen cupboard. I'd say that's a sign. I'm helping you organize. I shift the chamomile in front of the chai. You can never find anything in here. Funny how your helping always involves putting things in order when you're upset. She settles into her usual chair at the kitchen table. Want to tell me what Nathan did? The tin of Earl Grey slips from my fingers, clattering against the counter. What makes you think? Dear, you've been sorting my tea for 20 minutes while barely holding back tears. And I heard about the job offer in Burlington. Of course she did. Nothing stays secret in Juniper Falls, especially not from Hazel. It's fine. I line up the tea tins with military precision. He's doing what he always does. Moving on. And you're doing what you always do. Hiding in routine and books, instead of facing your feelings. I turn to protest, but Hazel's knowing look stops me. That's not, my voice cracks. I don't want to talk about it. Then why are you here? The question hangs in the air, gentle but unavoidable. Like so many things lately. Because, I whisper, my library doesn't feel like home anymore. He's everywhere. In the reading corner he designed, in the window seats that catch the morning light just right, in all the little details I never knew were missing until. I swallow hard. Until he filled them. Come sit. Hazel pats the chair beside her. Before you alphabetize my entire kitchen. I sink into the chair, suddenly exhausted. He's leaving, Hazel. Just like your mother? Her voice is soft. Nathan isn't your mother, Grace. No, he's worse. Because. I trail off, unable to say the words. Because you fell in love with him? My breath catches. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Hazel reaches for my hand. It's written all over your face every time he walks into a room. The same way it's written all over his when he looks at you. Then why is he leaving? Maybe for the same reason you hide in your books. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones we have to live through ourselves. I trace the familiar pattern on Hazel's tablecloth, thinking of all the afternoons I spent here as a child, finding comfort in her quiet wisdom. In books, you know how things will end. The hard parts have purpose. The pain leads somewhere. And you think real love doesn't? Real love leaves. Real love changes things. Real love is worth the risk. Hazel squeezes my hand. Your stories don't just teach escape, Grace. They teach courage. Hope. The belief that something beautiful is worth fighting for. Nathan thinks I use them to hide from reality. And what do you think? I'm quiet for a long moment, remembering the way Nathan's eyes lit up when he showed me his plans for the reading corner. How he always seems to know exactly what the library needs before I can find the words to ask. I think. My voice wavers. I think maybe we're both hiding. Me and my books, him and his constant motion. Both too scared to believe that sometimes reality can be better than fiction. Then maybe that's what you need to tell him. It's not that simple. Of course it's not. Hazel stands and moves to put the kettle on. The best stories never are. That's what makes them worth telling. I watch her measure tea leaves into her favorite pot, the one with tiny roses that she's had as long as I can remember. What if he doesn't want to hear it? What if he does? She turns, eyes twinkling. You're not the only one who's been acting out of character lately. I saw him reading poetry in the park yesterday. Despite everything, a smile tugs at my lips. Really? Frost, I believe. Something about roads not taken. The kettle whistles, its familiar sound filling the kitchen with warmth. As Hazel pours the water, the scent of bergamot rises between us. You know, she says thoughtfully, some of the best love stories I know started with two people who were afraid to believe in happy endings. I wrap my hands around the warm cup, letting its heat seep into my bones. Outside, spring sunshine paints the world in possibilities, and somewhere in town, a practical man is reading poetry. Pride and Prejudice lies open on my desk, but for the first time in my life, Elizabeth's witty banter with Mr. Darcy isn't enough to quiet my racing thoughts. Hazel's words keep echoing in my head, the best stories are worth telling. I just need to focus, I mutter, reaching for my planner. Maybe if I organize my thoughts, sort through my feelings with the same precision I apply to. I freeze, staring at the neat rows of ink on the page before me. There, in my own careful handwriting, is next week's schedule. I've already adjusted the summer reading program timeline, noted alternate contractors to consult about the ongoing renovations, left margin space for contingency plans. All because I assumed Nathan would be gone. Just like I've left margin space in every plan, every schedule, every part of my life. Always making room for the possibility, no, the expectation, that people will leave. My gaze drifts back to Pride and Prejudice, to Elizabeth's journey from judgment to understanding. How many times have I read this book, cheering her on as she confronts her own prejudices? And here I am, just as guilty of letting past hurts blind me to present possibilities. Till this moment, I never knew myself, I whisper, quoting Elizabeth's famous line of self-realization. With trembling fingers, I flip through my planner. There it is, on every page, evidence of a life lived in anticipation of goodbye. Empty spaces where hope should be. Backup plans for backup plans. I'm not just hiding in fiction. I'm hiding in a story I've written for myself, one where everyone leaves so there's no point in asking them to stay. No wonder Nathan thinks I live in a fantasy world. I've been so busy preparing for endings that I've never really let anything begin. The book on my desk catches the last rays of evening sun, its familiar pages promising the comfort of a well-worn path. But for once, I don't want to know how the story ends. I don't want to hide in someone else's carefully crafted world. I want to write my own story. My chair scrapes against the floor as I stand. Outside, twilight paints the sky in shades of possibility, and somewhere in this small town, a practical man who carves stars in reading corners is planning his escape. Unless I give him a reason to stay. I close my planner, leaving it behind with its careful margins and backup plans. Pride and Prejudice I return to its shelf. Some stories you have to live instead of read. In vain have I struggled, I whisper to the empty library, quoting Mr. Darcy's first confession of love. It will not do. But unlike Elizabeth, I'm not waiting until the last chapter to admit what I feel. Some declarations shouldn't wait for perfect moments or perfect words. Sometimes you have to step out of the safety of your library and into the uncertain beauty of a firefly-lit evening, ready to fight for your own happy ending. Or better yet, ready to fight for a real beginning.
Chapter 8. Nathan. The first firefly of the evening blinks to life as I stand in the middle of the meadow, trying to convince myself this is the right decision. Burlington. A fresh start. It's what I've always done, what I'm good at. So why does it feel like I'm demolishing something that could have been beautiful? For someone who claims to prefer reality, you're awfully good at running from it. Grace's voice cuts through the twilight. She stands at the edge of the meadow, silhouetted against the deepening purple sky. She's still wearing her librarian clothes, but her hair has come loose from its usual neat arrangement. Someone else can handle the rest of the renovation, I say, the words tasting like sawdust. The structure's sound now. Is that what you tell yourself? She takes a step closer. That everything's fixed, so it's okay to leave? Grace. No. Another step. You don't get to grace me in that careful voice. Not when you're running away. I'm not running. It's a job. It's what I do. Is it? Or is it just easier than admitting you're scared? A firefly drifts between us, its light reflecting in her eyes. Pretty bold accusation from someone who lives in fiction. You're right. Her quiet admission catches me off guard. I do hide in my books. I plan every detail of my life around the possibility of people leaving. But at least I'm finally admitting it. Something in my chest tightens. What do you want from me? I want you to tell me the truth. Not about the job, or the practical reasons, or whatever excuse you've built up in that renovation-focused brain of yours. She moves closer, close enough that I can smell the familiar hint of old books and lavender. Tell me why you're really leaving. Because this isn't my story. The words burst out before I can stop them. Happy endings, true love, fairy tale moments, and firefly-lit meadows. That's your world, Grace. Not mine. You think this is about happy endings? She laughs, but it's not her usual soft sound. This is about the fact that you've spent months showing me how to trust reality over fiction, but the second something real happens between us, you pack up and run. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From caring about someone who might leave? Too late. Her voice catches. From getting hurt? Also too late. From having to trust that sometimes reality can be better than fiction? Because that's what you've been teaching me, Nathan. Every day, with every practical solution and careful repair, you've been showing me that real life can be magical too. Grace, I stop, lost for words in a way that never happens with building plans and material lists. You know what I realized? She steps closer still, and it takes everything in me not to reach for her. I've been so busy planning around goodbyes that I never gave anyone a real reason to stay. And you've been so busy running that you never learned how to build something permanent for yourself. A whole constellation of fireflies has emerged around us now, their lights dancing like stars fallen to earth. Like the ones I carved in her reading corner, meant to guide her home. I'm not good at permanent, I manage. And I'm not good at uncertainty. Guess we'll have to figure it out together. She tilts her head, studying me in the gathering dark. Unless you're too scared to try something that's not in your blueprints. That's not fair. Neither is leading before giving this a chance. A chance at what? At writing our own story. She reaches out, touches my arm lightly. One without margin space for goodbyes or escape routes built into the foundation. I look down at her hand on my arm, at all the calluses and pencil smudges that tell our different stories. I don't know how to stay, I admit quietly. And I don't know how to stop planning for disasters. A smile tugs at her lips. But I'm willing to learn if you are. My phone rings, shattering the moment. Mike's name lights up the screen. Grace steps back, wrapping her arms around herself. You should get that. Nathan. Mike's voice crackles through the speaker. Tell me you're in. The board meets in an hour, and they need an answer on the theater contract. I turn away from Grace's two bright eyes. I thought I had until. They moved up the timeline. Look, this is huge, exactly what you've been working toward. But they won't hold it. I need an answer now. Through the phone, I hear the shuffle of papers, voices in the background. A real opportunity. A clear path forward. Behind me, a firefly dances past, reminding me of another path, one without blueprints or guarantees. Nathan? Two voices, Mike's through the phone, Grace's so soft I barely hear it. I'll call you back. I end the call, but can't quite turn around. Go! Grace's voice is steady, but I know her tells now. You have decisions to make. Grace. She takes a shaky breath. Just make sure you're running towards something this time, not away from it. I spot her silhouette in the meadow before I've even parked my truck. Of course she's still here. Grace Lawson, who believes in stories enough for both of us, wouldn't leave until she reached the end of this one. The telescope case bumps against my leg as I make my way through the tall grass. I found it 3 weeks ago in that antique shop off Main, buried under a stack of old maps. The brass was tarnished, the focus mechanism stuck, the tripod wobbly. But I could see what it could be. What it wanted to be. Kind of like me, maybe. Grace doesn't turn when I approach, but her shoulders tense. She's tracking the first evening stars appearing in the violet sky, arms wrapped around herself like she's holding something fragile together. The Burlington Theater board meets in 10 minutes, I say quietly. Now she does turn. Nathan. I told them no. She blinks. What? Turns out there are some things more important than the next big project. I set the telescope case in the grass. Some foundations worth building on. If this is pity, or guilt, or It's me choosing to stay. I take a step closer. It's me realizing that maybe the best opportunities aren't always the ones that take you somewhere new. Sometimes they're the ones that show you where you belong. A firefly drifts between us, and Grace's eyes follow it. Where you belong, she repeats softly. Here. I reach for the telescope case. With you. If you'll have someone who's still learning how to put down roots. She watches as I open the case, revealing the restored brass telescope, its surface catching the last light of day. What is? Found it a few weeks ago. Been restoring it ever since. I start setting up the tripod, letting my hands steady my racing heart. Thought maybe we could use it for stargazing. You know, combine your love of stories with my need to understand how things work. You've been working on this for weeks? Even while planning to leave? I adjust the angle, unable to quite meet her eyes. Guess some part of me knew I was making the wrong choice. That running might be familiar, but it's not always right. My hands shake slightly as I fine-tune the focus. Grace steps closer, close enough that I can smell books and lavender and possibility. There, I say, stepping back. Take a look. She bends to peer through the eyepiece, and her soft gasp makes everything worth it. It's beautiful. The stars are so clear, so, she straightens suddenly, turning to face me. Why? Because you taught me that sometimes the most practical thing you can do is believe in magic. I touch her cheek gently. Because you make me want to build something that lasts. Even if it's scary? Terrifying. I smile. But I figure if you're brave enough to step out of your stories, I can be brave enough to stay in one. Our story, she whispers. Yeah. I lean forward until our foreheads touch. And I'm thinking it might be the best one yet. Her hand finds mine in the growing dark. Above us, stars emerge one by one, and fireflies create their own constellations in the meadow grass. When Grace tilts her face up to mine, her smile outshines them all. You know, she says softly, in books, this would be the moment for a perfect first kiss. I laugh. Good thing we're living in reality then. And as I draw her closer, I realize that sometimes reality is better than any story. Sometimes it's worth staying still long enough to let magic find you. Sometimes the best adventures aren't about where you're going, but who you're coming home to. I lean in slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she meets me halfway. Her lips are soft against mine, and that first contact sends warmth spreading through my chest. The familiar scent of her, lavender and old books, and something uniquely Grace, fills my senses. When her hand comes up to grip my shoulder, her touch steadies me even as it makes my pulse race. And as she sighs into the kiss, the sound undoes something tight and careful in my chest, replacing it with a certainty I've never known. Around us, fireflies dance like stars fall into earth, lighting our own private galaxy. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel the urge to measure or analyze or plan an escape. I'm exactly where I need to be.
Epilogue. Grace. Juniper Falls, 3 months later. You know, Nathan says, adjusting the growing collection of books in my tote bag, when I suggested the farmer's market, I didn't realize I was signing up to be your personal library Sherpa. I add another paperback to the stack, ignoring his theatrical sigh. Says the man who spent 20 minutes comparing heirloom tomatoes. That's different. Tomatoes are essential. And books aren't? His grin, the one that still makes my heart skip, flashes in the morning sunlight. Not arguing that. Just suggesting we might need a bigger bag. Or a forklift. The Saturday market hums with life around us, stalls overflowing with spring produce and crafts. Mrs. Peterson waves from her jam stand, and I notice she's wearing the apron Nathan fixed for her last week. He's always doing things like that, quiet acts of care that weave him deeper into the fabric of our town. Oh. I grab his arm, nearly causing him to drop his carefully selected vegetables. Rose has her herb stand set up. We have to stop. Lead the way, book whisperer. Rose's stall draws the eye with its neat rows of potted herbs and dried bouquets. She's arranging sprigs of thyme when we approach, her auburn curls escaping their messy bun. Grace. Her smile brightens. And Nathan? Still keeping our library standing? Barely, he says, eyeing my book bag. Don't suppose you have any advice for someone who can't keep plants alive? Asking for a friend. Rose laughs, reaching for a small potted basil. Start small, and don't forget to water it. Though something tells me Grace won't let you forget. She has reminders in her planner, Nathan stage whispers. I elbow him gently. At least I don't measure the water down to the milliliter. Once. I did that once. Rose watches our exchange. You two are good for each other, she says, wrapping up a bundle of lavender I hadn't even asked for yet. She knows my weaknesses too well. A shadow falls across the stall, and Rose's smile turns mischievous. Looks like Juniper Falls' grumpiest chef is making his daily inspection. I follow her gaze to where Daniel Hartman stands at the edge of the market, scowling at Rose's herb display like it's personally offended him. His reputation for being particular about ingredients is apparently well earned. He's been hovering all morning, Rose confides, seemingly unbothered. Probably planning to tell me everything I'm doing wrong with my basil cultivation. Speak of the devil, Nathan murmurs as Daniel strides past, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like amateur hour. Rose's eyes spark with something that might be irritation or interest, possibly both. But before I can analyze it further, Nathan tugs me toward the flower stand. Come on, he says. Before you adopt any more books. I don't adopt, I stop as he hands the vendor money for a small bouquet of wildflowers. What's this for? Do I need a reason? You usually have one. Several, actually, with supporting evidence. He laughs, taking my hand as we head toward the park. The morning sun paints everything in warm light, turning ordinary moments into something magical. Or maybe that's just how life feels now, with Nathan beside me. Fine. I have reasons. He ticks them off on his free hand. 1. You look beautiful today. 2. I love you. 3. I'm really glad I stayed. My heart still flips when he says things like that. That's a very practical list. I'm a very practical man. He pulls me closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. Who happens to be surprisingly good at happy endings. Beginnings, I correct him, rising on my toes to properly kiss him. We're still at the beginning. Around us, the market bustles with life and possibility. And as Nathan leads me toward our favorite picnic spot, our hands linked and our bags full of books and vegetables and fresh herbs, I think about how the best stories are the ones you don't see coming. The ones that surprise you with their magic, even as they plant your feet firmly in reality. The end. This has been Firefly Nights. Written by Susanne Ash. Copyright 2025 by Susanne Ash. Production copyright 2025 by Susanne Ash. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe if you want me to put more of my books on YouTube. Visit my website at www.susanneash.com for more of my books or find me on Amazon.